You are listening to X Wing Radio.
Welcome back, Imperials, Rebels, and Scoundrels. I'm David, that's Wesley, and this is X-Wing Radio, your weekly broadcast from a galaxy far, far away.
So I guess we're trying out a new intro here. That's an interesting thought. David, I think everyone who has made it this far in the video and not clicked away, because you know what? It happens. But comment down below what category you're a part of. Let us know. I'd like to know who's listening. All right, so David, today, last week we talked about today, last week, all right? So, anyways, all over the place. Yesterday. So we talked about Grand Admiral Thrawn. Today, we're going to dive a little bit more into his character, but specifically the introduction of his character into the Star Wars universe. I think, right? This was the first
Yep,
introduction of him. Would have been, yeah. Okay, I thought so. With Heir to the Empire, the book.
that is correct. So, yeah, we're talking about Heir to the Empire by Timothy Zahn. Originally published in 91, I believe. Yes, May of 91. Um, so this was really the beginning of the expanded universe. I'm not even sure was how much of the expanded universe existed before this, but this is the really was the beginning of the expanded universe. In fact, I actually found a quote from Dave Filoni that I kind of want to wanted to start off with about Heir to the Empire. I actually found it on the Star Wars Wikipedia. Because I looked up Heir to the Empire, and that was one of the first results Star Wars related, and of course everything Star Wars related is on Wikipedia. Um,
Yes.
so this quote from Dave Filoni says, "You couldn't have grown up a Star Wars fan without encountering Thrawn in Heir to the Empire. It was a dark time when there weren't any movies, and it blew our minds that there could be more."
Mm-hmm.
So basically saying, you know, at this point, all that existed were technically there were six movies, but the three movies. Um,
Yeah, we're not going to count those.
if you know what I'm talking about with if you don't know what I'm talking about, we've talked about two of them on the channel, those being um first Ewok movie and the holiday special, which yeah, and we are talking about the second Ewok movie in a few months, so stay tuned for that. Wesley
We're
requested
trying
a
to push it.
break before
We're
Wesley
trying to
requested
push it
a
back as
break
far as
before we
possible.
yeah. He requested a
I
break
need
before
I'm still not ready for it, David. I'm not ready for it.
well, it was your idea to talk about the holiday special again in December. So that's gonna
I
happen
know,
apparently.
I know. David, you know what? Maybe I like torturing ourselves, but that's one time out of the I don't even know if I'm going to watch it again. I probably should. At least part of it. Oh well. Moving on.
Moving on. So yes, this book did a lot. As I said, it was really the beginning of the expanded universe, and I'm using the term expanded universe and not Star Wars Legends in this instance because Star Wars Legends wasn't a thing until Disney bought it. Until Disney bought Star Wars. At that point, anything that wasn't made by Lucasfilm directly was expanded universe.
I have a Lego uh Star Wars encyclopedia, character
Hmm.
encyclopedia, and when you're looking through it, I believe, well, a lot of it is what characters were from the actual game, but a lot
Hmm.
of it was also like whatever sets that had come out for it. But they had it broken down through each movie. So, in
Hmm.
episode one, they had all the characters from episode one and broken down throughout all the six movies. And then when it got to the back of the book, there was an EU section for all of the characters that were brought to the Lego sets that weren't actually part of the first six movies. And they had it as EU for Expanded Universe.
Hmm. Yeah. So, really, the beginning of the expanded universe. It also first introduced, well, obviously, all the original characters like Talon Card, Mara Jade, and obviously the titular Grand Admiral Thrawn. But it also introduced, like, I believe this is the first Star Wars thing ever to have go to Coruscant,
Okay. Yeah, it's true.
and it also, well, it sort of introduced Kashyyyk. I guess technically the holiday special did, but we're not going back to that, so
Well,
we'll count it as introducing Kashyyyk.
originally, George Lucas did plan on having the Ewoks be Wookiees and it be Kashyyyk, but yeah, he saved that for a much better movie.
Hmm.
Anyways,
Yeah,
we're not gonna talk about the wet dreams of Wookiees.
that's
uh Go back and listen to the episode. It's better than watching the movie, but it's still. Uh,
I
I think you
still
and I
don't
had
think we have recovered from it.
no. I don't think you recover from something like that. I don't know how you do, but if you do, we are very, very far from doing that. Anyways, moving away from any of that, it did. You're right. It does introduce a lot. Uh, I found it interesting. I think so a big part of the book uh so a big part of this book is Princess Leia or Leia or whatever, Leia Organa is trying to escape capture. Um that's why she ends up going to Kashyyyk, but she's being chased by this species called the Nogri. Well, Thrawn has a specific, like, he is in charge. Like, the Nogri are more or less kind of slaves to him, um
Hmm.
which we can get into that a little bit more later. But there's a specific one, I forget his name, but that is like Thrawn's personal bodyguard, which is someone that I believe we see. Maybe it's in Rebels, but I think we see him in the Clone Wars. He's a bounty hunter, and he ends up going and working for um Thrawn here. I don't remember his name, but I know we see him later or earlier, I guess. And something else. I just don't remember his name.
Let me look
Uh,
here. So it's introduced in the first chapter because that's like when Hellion first goes down to talk to Thrawn. Let me see here. Um,
I don't even know how to spell Nogri. Oh, there it is. Let's
let's
see if we
see.
can.
Root.
Rook, yeah, Rook or whatever. Yeah, which is someone. Let's see, what else do we see him in? Because I got some pictures of him here. On um, the actual Wikipedia page. Yeah, Rook, and we see him where? Is it Rebels?
Uh, I just pulled it up. The animation style looks like Rebels.
Yeah, I was about to say that's what it looks like, Rebel. I see there's one picture here with him fighting against Ezra.
Hmm.
So definitely
Which
in Rebels, which Thrawn is in Rebels, so maybe that's the only place that we see him. But it is interesting, like this is the first time like I've been introduced now to Heir to the Empire. This came before anything that I've watched, but to see the tie-in, obviously them making the shows later and tying this character back into it is cool. But to be like, oh hey, I've seen that character before, you know. Um,
which I actually didn't put the pieces together that that was Rook in Rebels. Maybe it's been a while, maybe it's been too long since I've watched
w-
Rebels, but
well, for me personally, the only reason I ended up figuring that out was because I looked the character up. Because I was sitting there, you remember the scene? So there's one scene where they come where the what's the name of his ship?
uh, Ron Strip,
Yeah.
the Chimera.
The Chimera. Yeah. So the Chimera comes across Luke Skywalker, and they want to capture him, and they end up failing because Skywalker and R2D2 are just you know they're the good guys, but they also are cunning enough to find their way out of these situations. So they end up getting out of it. And in that scene, Thrawn goes up to the officer who is supposed to be over or like part of getting the tractor beam or whatever in, and asks him why he failed. And anyways, the scene ends with Rook killing him, killing this officer. And when they were doing the scene, I was a little thrown off. I'm listening to the book here, and I had to go back and kind of re-listen to it because I was a little confused on what all had happened. Um, and I was like, okay, well, the Nogri, this, that. I'm interested in who the Nogri are. Like, I need a picture to put with the character because I know what Thrawn looks like. Pelion is a human male, so I know what that looks like. I know what the original cast looks like. But this one character, I was like, I have no idea what this is like, what this supposed to look like. So I looked it up and I came across that character. I ended up finding Rook and I was like, oh, I know him. He's from Rebels. So that's the only really reason because I had some questions and I needed to put faces with the actual name. So that's why I actually
Mm,
was able to piece it together. More of a curiosity than an actual, hey, I recognize the name kind of a deal.
yeah. I actually just looked up Nogri on Google Images, and of course, pictures of Rook from Rebels comes up.
Yeah.
And there's also some other ones from presumably like fan art or whatever, or concept art. I see some of this says concept art, but none of these are actually really what I pictured.
Hmm.
Even the one from Rebels, which that's probably the closest to what I actually pictured from reading the book, but it's not actually, not exactly what I pictured. Anyway, we should probably
Um,
just go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Yours. All I was gonna say was just moving on to actually how the book starts. That's all I was
Well,
getting
I
into, and
was
I
about to
figured you
say we
were
should probably
too.
have to briefly
So
go over the story.
that's why I
Okay.
shut up and was gonna let you just continue with what you were saying. So
Okay. So yeah, briefly going over the story. So I did find it interesting. The book starts with the Empire. It starts with introducing the antagonists. So
yeah,
obviously, it starts with from Pelion's point of view. Uh,
mm,
Pelion is the captain of the Chimera, which is a star destroyer. Um, one of the star destroyers in the Imperial Remnant fleet.
it's Thrawn's flagship. It was his
Yeah,
flagship during the time of the Empire, and it still is now as he's
yeah,
trying to, I guess, take claim of being heir to the Empire.
yeah. And it is an interesting way to start it because you do get it because it is from Pelion's point of view. You almost get to like there's almost this level of fear when Thrawn is
Mm,
introduced because it is from from the point of views of Thrawn's subordinate.
Yeah, and you think about it too, it makes sense because Pelion was a part of the Empire. He saw
Mm.
the inner workings of the Empire, and as mentioned in the book, he saw how failure was taken care of, basically, in the
And
Empire. And
he
Thrawn
also
is not.
was,
Go ahead.
Hellion was also a survivor of the Battle of Endor.
Yes. So, but like we see it all throughout the movies how Vader dealt with failure, and
Mm-hmm.
so many times Pelion kind of winces when something happens because he's expecting to get hurt or killed, you know,
Mm-hmm.
somehow by Thrawn. But Thrawn's much more patient. He also realizes that he doesn't have the resources to kill all of his men who keep
Mm.
failing him.
In fact,
So
the scene you were talking about earlier was, I think, the only time Ron killed a subordinate
yeah. hmm
in this
and
book.
and it, and it, and the thing is too is his reasoning behind doing it is because he says, you know, like failure's not the problem. It's trying to fix the problem. That if you're not willing to do that, that's a problem. And this guy wasn't taking responsibility for failing. Obviously it's a lose-lose situation for the person who ended up dying in that, obviously. But essentially, I guess what Thrawn wanted was him to take responsibility for
It's that
not.
line Thrawn gives of what's the difference between failure and a mistake. Failure is just not succeeding. It only becomes a mistake when you do not reconcile for failure.
Yeah, yeah. So and that's why he had that done and all that stuff. But I will say that is a very interesting thing that you bring up there is that pretty much all the scenes that we see from the antagonist point of view is Pelion. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
from Pelion's point of view. We see his inner thoughts and inner dialogue and all that stuff, and we don't see it from Thrawn's point of view. We just get to hear what he says. And then so it is a very interesting style and take to see it from his side, because that does help enforce the like you said when they introduce Thrawn. There's much more like there's that threat kind of a deal.
Mm. And so I'm trying to remember names, so I'm gonna skim over this real quick. Um, okay, so the book starts out right after the Empire had stolen um what exactly was it? It was so it was after a raid in the Abrua sky system.
Mhm.
So basically, they were looking for stealing information, basically.
Mhm.
And that's kind of central to the whole plot of this book because so the way the Thrawn trilogy is written, each book leads directly into the next, and so this book ends on a cliffhanger, but it's setting up the trilogy.
Yeah.
It's kind of lead because there's several times where Thrawn says like the plan that they enact at the end of the book is the beginning of the victory campaign against the rebellion.
Mhm. Which that's
Not
another
it's
interesting thing. We still refer to it as the rebellion as opposed to the new galactic empire. There is a point I think when Pelion or someone mentions it as the new galactic, not included, the new republic, and he's like, no, this is not the new republic. This is they're still the rebellion, essentially.
mhm, yeah, and that's just an interesting thing. So basically, this first chapter is just setting up Thrawn as the antagonist. That's really the main point of it. It does tease some of the plans, because obviously it sets up. I'm going to um I forget what the planet's name is, but the planet where Mount Tantus is.
Yeah. They do mention that they are going to go to the Emperor's Vault or whatever, which is Mount Tantus. But I don't remember what the name of the planet is.
Uh, so this looks like it's the cannon side, which, if that sounds familiar, Mount Tantus, that's because that's the
It
same thing that was in Bad Batch.
yeah.
Same place. Whether or not they're going to use
Um
that in uh in the Heir to the Empire movie, I don't know. But
Wayland.
Wayland, that's right. So
Wayland is the name of the planet.
between where I'm about to jump to and this first chapter, it does bring in Luke, Leia, and Han, which I suppose we should probably talk about first before I jump to this. Um, because I was just gonna kind of continue the Imperial storyline, but
Well,
basic.
before you get too far into this, go over when this story starts. I thought I saw something about 9 BBY, but how many years after or removed from the original trilogy are we now?
I believe it's 5 years after the original trilogy. Let me see. It says here. So 9 ABY, which
Yeah,
it
ABY,
would be
not
5
BBY,
years.
never mind.
Which, yeah, it would be 5 years after the original trilogy.
Okay. So as long as you
The
have a
Galactic
little
Civil was,
placeholder.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So basically, as we see Luke, Leia, and Han here, so obviously they're still trying to set up the new government.
Mhm.
I think they mentioned it several times. It's kind of hard to transition a military-oriented rebellion into a civilian government, but
Yeah. And
yeah,
one
they're,
thing
they're
too to think about, and I think I mentioned this last week, is the politicians. Like, sure, there are some changeover, but there's also some areas in which, like, and this is something that I think we saw, would have been Mandalorian? What TV show was it that we saw a little bit of the inner workings of the New Republic? Um,
I think that would
but
have been the Mandalorian, yeah.
I think it was Mandalorian. But like, you think about it, like, there's a lot to it that some people were just doing their job, but you don't always know what people are there for. So like there's a lot of inner workings to the Republic. And if
Hmm.
you don't completely take out the trash, there's always that sense of did we change enough stuff? So, there's a lot of people in the politic area in this that are really just I like normal politics. They're just out for themselves and
Hmm.
doing what's best interest for them. And you know, that makes reestablishing or establishing a new government kind of tricky, even when you have someone like Mon Mothma heading it up and Leia, trying to deal with a lot of it. They talked about how Han has become a bigger part of having to deal with some of this stuff too, which he absolutely hates.
Hmm.
So,
Which, let's talk about that real quick too, because I think Timothy Zahn got the characterizations of Luke, Leia, and Han like
oh,
down
yes.
pat, and Lando too.
Yes.
But of the original characters, he got
Mhm.
the characterization like down pat. Like Han especially, because I feel like Han's the hardest of the four. Han is probably the hardest
Mhm.
character to write.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
But he did great.
because
Great job.
because I mean, Luke and Leia, while they are really good characters, are less dimensional than Han. There's more
Hmm.
to Han than like because of his kind of his transitioning from you know oh, I'm out for me. I'm looking out for what's best for me to but we need to take down the empire. This is
Hmm. Yeah. And even the
because of that.
dynamic of it's all about me to, oh, I have a wife now, they're married.
Yeah.
Oh, their kids too coming along the way. He's they know about this, but at the beginning of the book, you find out Leia is pregnant with twins, which would be names. What are the names? Jason and
Um,
it's a boy and a girl. It's Jason and something. What's the daughter's name? But you're right. You're right. Him moving from we've talked about this before. While you're looking this up, I'll keep talking. But we've talked about this before where he started out in A New Hope as that scoundrel category in Star Wars, and he has moved into more of the hero category, and that's a those are two different categories, opposite sides of the spectrum. One's out for yourself and one's out for the greater good. And Han has had to shift to it, and he's been a little shaky. That was his character development and growth throughout the original trilogy, and we see him become more of that hero character in the Return of the Jedi. And this is just continuing with that character growth to get him more to that side of things. And also him marrying Leia, there's that dynamic of him and him having to look out for Leia. There's many times because Leia is not necessarily being trying to be assassinated, because I think that might be the idea that they have to begin with, but they're trying to capture Leia. He's all out for her best interest, trying to figure out what is best for her, because obviously he loves her, cares about her, and wants what's best for the kids as well. Did you find the name?
Jenna.
Jenna. Okay. Jason and Jenna. For some reason that doesn't sound right, but I trust what you looked up.
That's what came up on Wikipedia. So,
Okay. Okay.
but yeah. Um, now Luke, the chapter when Luke and Leia are kind of introduced in this book doesn't really have too much effect on the story. So basically, the main premise of that chapter is Luke is kind of, so he starts off in a dream where he's talking to Ben, and as I mentioned a few weeks ago, they kind of had this, or Timothy Zahn kind of this thing with the Force ghosts where they don't stick around forever,
Hmm.
and so this is the last time Ben can actually contact Luke.
Yeah.
Um, and Luke is already kind of troubled with everything going on, and this just kind of adds to that.
Hmm.
And the biggest thing, one of the biggest things too, is that they moved the New Republic government into the Imperial Palace. So my light just fell over. I think I kicked it.
That's not good. You mentioned them moving into the Imperial Palace. This obviously is something that troubles David, because this, not David, Luke, doesn't trouble you. It troubles Luke. Sorry, my mind's a little scatterbrained right now. But anyways, so it troubles him because of the fact that this is where the Emperor was. Like,
Mhm,
this is, and the fact that he doesn't sense anything, and that's all they wanted. They said, "Hey, do you sense any evils going on here?" And he's like, "Oh no," and they're like, "Okay, great, let's do this," and they're already moving in. But it's like it feels off to him that he can't sense anything here.
mhm,
Um, but one thing they also introduce at this point in time is not really introduce, follow up on, and something that happens throughout the book is Leia's training to become a Jedi.
mhm,
Um, that obviously, they don't really go into it in the original trilogy, besides the fact that that she is the child of Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one, the one who would have become the most powerful Jedi ever had he not gotten his arms and legs chopped off. Um, and then she's his daughter, so she is force sensitive. She hasn't had formal training, but they do go into some of the actual training that she has had up until this point. She has her own lightsaber, which I think they introduced later. Um and in this scene, she sends C-3PO to talk to Luke, to kind of comfort him, or at least distract him or something like that, because she sensed that something was off. So kind
mhm,
of getting her in that realm of, hey, she's starting to develop, and maybe understand how to use those force powers.
Yeah. Now, probably of the three original character introductions that we see here at the beginning of the book, probably the one that has the biggest impact on the actual story is Han's, because it starts
Hmm.
off with Han in the Mos Eisley Cantina meeting with Gravis, who was a smuggler, who is a
Hmm.
smuggler that Han had worked with. Um, Basically, the New Republic needs cargo ships, and so Han's idea is to try to recruit smugglers to for shipping.
Yeah.
And there's so a lot of the smugglers are kind of hesitant to, or actually pretty much all of them, because Han has had no luck up to this point to recruit any of them, are hesitant to help the New Republic because they think it's just a scheme by Admiral Akbar to arrest them, because
Hmm.
the Mon Calamari are apparently notorious for hating smugglers.
Yeah. I do want to mention this little this thing that happened to me when I was reading through it. So I was listening to the audiobook for this, and um after the scene, so Han gets introduced, he's in a bar or whatever, or at a meetup, right? And Luke is introduced and he is on Coruscant. Well, my book must have either kept playing or skipped ahead. But I finished listening to it. I think I had just gotten to the scene with Han, right? And Luke is still on Coruscant, all that stuff's going on. I come back, and Luke is in a prison cell where later he gets captured by Talon Card. He's in a prison cell, and Han is still doing the meetup because I listened to a portion of that scene where him and R2 are in the cells next to each other, and then he escapes. I listened to that, and then it goes back over to the meetup that Han and Lando are going to be having, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, well, this part makes some sense. But Luke was on Coruscant. What happened? I was like, I gotta have missed something. And then I looked at like where I was at, and it was like, an hour or two removed from from where I was before. And I was like, yeah, something's wrong here. So I had to go back and figure out where I was at originally. But I remember sitting there, I was like, yeah, something's got to be wrong because Luke was not in a prison cell earlier. Either that or I didn't understand the scene. So just me being confused. That's all the point of that was.
Mhm. So,
It's easily to do.
yeah. Let's see here. Um, so now we kind of get back to what the Empire, because this is all just set up for the story. We've already been recording for 30 minutes, and we're not even to the actual story
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah.
So, but it is all important, and so chapter 3 starts out with a smuggler named Talon Card, where we introduce Talon Card and his second command, Mara Jade. That name's probably more
Hmm.
familiar to people who aren't familiar with Heir to the Empire. Um, so basically, they're held up on this, or their base is this planet called. Help me out, Wesley. Um,
Sluis Van is all that's coming to mind, and that's not the planet, I don't think. The Sluis Van system.
no, Sluis Van is the spaceport at the end.
Yeah, I know, that's what I'm saying. That's the only thing that's coming up in my mind.
I can't tell you. Anyway, so
You keep talking and I'm gonna look it up.
basically, this planet has a bunch of special wildlife, let's say, and that's actually where Thrawn heads to before going to Wayland, because
Hmm.
Thrawn is interested in a creature called a creature called an Islamari, which has I think the way it describes it in the book is the power to push back the Force. So well, so chapter three is kind of, or the beginning of chapter three, because I think it goes or goes back to following Thrawn, or Pelion and Thrawn, towards the end. But basically, Thrawn comes to this planet to collect Islamari, and Talon Card helps, or he sends some men to help Thrawn's men. Basically, for no payment, basically, because in his mind, observing the Empire is payment enough. Um, so basically, what Thrawn wants the Islamari for is, or when they go to Wayland, because they're going to the Imperial's vault, or the Emperor's vault in Mount Tantus, and Thrawn suspects that Emperor would have placed a Dark Jedi as the guard for the vault. So Islamari obviously negate the effects of the Force. So that's why they get the Islamari. When they get to Wayland, they sit down in a city near Mount Tantus and come across a Dark Jedi, but not the Dark Jedi that they were expecting, because he's
Um,
not the guardian of the mountain.
yes. Before we get too far to that, the planet in which Talon Card has his base operating out of with the Alyssa Lamari is Merkur.
Merkur, that's right.
Yeah.
So much of the
It
book
was one of
takes place in Merkur. I can't believe I
so
forgot that.
honestly though. So Dave, let me go over this real quick with you. So the way this thing is spelled, right, is not something my brain can handle. It's Myrkr. But as soon as I saw that, I was like, "Oh yeah," because I've heard it before. That's Merkur. But I wouldn't have known how to probably honestly how to pronounce that if I hadn't heard it.
There's
Continue.
definitely an advantage to having listened to the book and then going back and seeing, oh yeah, okay, that's how that's that word. I know how to pronounce
Yeah.
that because
That's
like
why I like listening to it and then having the book there too, as as much as possible.
so like the Dark Jedi's name that they find on Wayland, Jarua Sabaoth. I don't know if I could have pronounced that. No, because
I knew of Sabayoth because I knew the character Sabayoth, but when I went to look him up, I had no idea you spelled it with a C. I hate
yeah,
English.
so Sabaoth is spelled C apostrophe Baoth.
I don't understand.
So yeah, Sabaoth. So an interesting thing with Jarua Sabaoth is that this Jarua Sabaoth they find on Wayland is not Jarua Sabaoth, which we hinted at last week. I didn't want to mention it because it's an interesting thing to talk. An interesting holdover artifact from the fact that these books are not, or these books were written before the prequels, because Jeru Sabaoth in these books is a clone.
Well, even specifically, not even just being written before the prequels, but before a lot of the information that came out, like during the Clone Wars, and specifically stuff that was written with the Plagueis novel, which is something that we've talked about in Bad Batch, clones of force sensitive beings wasn't something that's possible currently in canon Star Wars.
Mhm.
And
Which this actually,
as we see with Druid Sabaoth in this story, he is I mean, we don't really know much about the character outside
mhm.
of this book, which is a clone. He might be as powerful or more powerful than the
So
original.
there are two interesting things with the fact that Jeru Sabaoth is a clone in relation to Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Okay.
So the original draft of Heir to the Empire did not have Jeru Sabaoth. It was actually the Dark Jedi that Thrawn and Hellion encountered on Wayland was actually a clone of Ben Kenobi.
That would be interesting.
And another interesting tidbit, not related to Heir to the Empire, about the cloning thing, is the fact that originally it was actually a fan theory when Star Wars came out that because obviously Ben mentions Clone Wars,
Hmm.
so a lot of people thought that Obi-Wan Kenobi was just a phonetic spelling of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and that he was a clone and just took the identity of Ben Kenobi after Ben Kenobi died in the Clone Wars.
That's interesting too. Huh.
So
Fan
all that
theories.
together would have made an interesting canon to Star Wars.
Yeah,
Alternate universe, I don't know. But
that's interesting. That is really actually
but
that's
knowing that about the original draft for Heir to the Empire, that also makes that first scene with Luke all the more interesting. Because
yeah, it's true.
if he was, Ben left, and then, well, not in Heir to the Empire, but in the later books, he comes across Ben Kenobi, you know,
Yeah. Now you said
alive.
you haven't gotten to the other books, have you? You haven't
No,
started
I
reading them?
have not read
Okay.
anything past Heir to the Empire. I know you said you started
Okay.
Dark Force Rising, but
Yeah. Well,
um,
then we'll get to some of that stuff later. But yeah, that would be very, very interesting. An interesting dynamic there. To see that, and to also see, because I would assume for there probably was not that much difference in the character. Like
mm,
naming might have been different, and there probably would have been some differences within the character, but obviously he's still supposed to be a dark Jedi. So
mm,
he wouldn't be the Ben that Obi-Wan or that Ben was, or that Luke knew. So later on when he does come across him, yeah, he'd be like, Ben, and he'd be like, I no idea who you are, but whatever. So
mm.
that would be a very interesting
So
thing to have seen.
basically, finally setting up the whole premise of the book. Thrawn, well, amongst other things that he wants out of the Emperor's vault on Mount Tantus, like a cloaking shield, and there's one other thing that I can't remember right now. He also wants the help of a Dark Jedi, because as we mentioned last week, um, Emperor, when the Empire was, fighting, specifically it talks about the Battle of Endor, the Emperor was used battle meditation to coordinate troops. And so Thrawn wants the help of Sabaoth to help coordinate troops with in special occasions. He doesn't want to overdo it because he doesn't want his troops to become reliant on it, like the Empire was at the Battle of Endor. That's why after Palpatine died, the Empire's forces just kind of crumbled. I mean, Hellion might not agree with that, but that's the case.
The
Um,
statistics show it, and that's what Thrawn is basing his
yeah,
hypothesis off of.
yes. So in return, Thrawn promises Sabaoth Jedi apprentices in the form
That
of
being
Luke Skywalker, Leia Organa Solo, and the twins.
which, if the two Luke and Leia don't work out, the twins being not even born yet would be very easy to shape and mold to Sabaoth's will, basically.
And that's the whole premise of why I think you mentioned it earlier. Leia is facing getting kidnapped because
Yes.
so I'm gonna gloss over a little bit because there's a lot that happen, a lot of book that doesn't progress
Yes.
the story a whole lot, but essentially the Nogri that we mentioned earlier, or Thrawn sends the Nogri to try to kidnap Leia or Luke and Leia on planet where they'd
It's a
gone
planet that
to.
they're doing some diplomatic
Yeah,
relations.
and they obviously Luke, Leia, and Han escape. Um, Thrawn decides that Luke trying to capture both of them together is not really going to work out, so they try to just target Leia because Leia's the easier target. Because while she has been training as a Jedi, she's not as proficient in the Jedi arts as Luke is.
He also puts a bounty on Luke's head for bounty hunters to go capture him, which will come in later.
Yeah. Um.
Well,
So
we'll talk about that later.
yeah. So Luke ends up going to Dagobah to find because something kind of the back of his head tells him to do something important there at Dagobah, and then uh, Han and Leia go off on their own for another diplomatic mission. They get attacked by Nogri again, end up escaping, and Luke on Dagobah finds a device, presumably from or that was left behind by a Dark Jedi after the Clone Wars, and both Han and Leia and Luke decide to go find Lando for his help, because Luke needs help identifying this device, and then uh, Luke or Leia and Han need the help of a slicer so that they can find a. Basically, they want to go into hiding. Or Han wants Leia to go into hiding. Leia still wants to be able to get messages from Coruscant, so they need to find a planet with a New Republic. Forget the term they use. But basically, a New Republic outpost, and they need a slicer so that they can hack into the government system to be able to get
Yeah.
news from Coruscant.
Very
Um,
complicated way of going about doing things, but yes, yeah. Now,
which in any case leads them to Lando.
yeah. So what ends up happening with Lando is he Luke finds out what the device is called and what it is and all that stuff. But Lando and Han go off in the Falcon to do they take the Falcon or do they take the Lady Luck? I think Leia and Chewbacca take the Lady Luck.
So while they're on so Lando has another one of his way out there schemes for making money. Basically, they're mining raw material off the super hot planet where like on the sun side of this planet it's too hot for anything to operate, so they have a mo- a moving or they built a moving city that's a dreadnought cruiser on top of 40 recommissioned Imperial AT-ATs. To stay out of the sun. So when Luke, Han, and Leia get there, the Empire attacks and steals some of Lando's mole mining ships, which basically is just a mining ship that is used for um mining raw materials in I think it was originally made for asteroids, is what they said, mining asteroids.
Yep.
Basically, areas where there's no air. It
Yeah.
basically seals to the surface and then has a little door. It uses something to break up the material, and then use a little door. You can just go in and collect the raw material. So the Empire steals 50 of them right when they get there. Um, where was I going with this? Yeah. So while they're there, uh, they decide Leia would be best off hiding on Kashyyyk with the Wookiees, because even though more people would be involved in hiding her, there'd be more people who know she was there. They're all going to be Wookiees, which Wookiees are very anti-imperial, and a lot of them, even though nowadays they don't really look on humans too kindly because of what the Empire did to them. Leia is one of the heroes of the rebellion, and so she's the Wookiees view that as having a life debt to Leia, like a bunch of them do. So that's
Even aside from that, because Chewie has the life debt to Han, which now extends to Leia,
mm,
um, the Wookiees would honor that and
yeah,
protect her.
yeah. So
So
there's all that, and
she takes
then
the Lady Luck, though, right?
yeah, she takes the Lady Luck.
Okay,
So
that's what I was
Lando,
trying to get at.
yeah, Lando and Han go off on the Falcon, pretending that Leia is still with them because they did a voice swap with C-3PO, so C-3PO has Leia's voice.
Yeah, so they send out transmissions with the voice, which you know how annoyed I was. Like, I understand it's a book. I know you know how annoyed I was when Thrawn like detailed exactly what happened when they were talking about their scouts seeing this happen, and he was like, "Well, probably what happened was this, and this." Long story short, uh cutting back to Leia on Kashyyyk, which is what Thawne deduces what happens, and which is where he sends the Nogri to go capture her. Um During one of the raids, I think there's two times that I think one time Leia sees one of the Nogri and they don't end up finding anything, but one time she gets attacked and uh anyways, they capture one of the Nogris. Do you remember what his name was?
Um, I don't. I saw it earlier in the book, but I don't remember what it was.
Okay. Well, if you want to go and look at that, essentially, they capture him, and they find out that Leia is actually the daughter of the Malari Ush, which is what they called Vader, and they kind of revere Vader as some kind of a god in a sense. Um, Vader saved their people, which is why they kind of see themselves as owning the Empire. Um, they go into detail about it later, but there was a battle that took place above their planet. Now, the Nogri are a little bit of a kind of like the Wookiees. They're not a very advanced species, so they didn't know what was going on above in the skies. They thought gods were fighting and having a battle. Um, but anyways, so they their planet was completely devastated by this battle, and then Vader came down, and they thought it as one of the gods was coming down, and he he provided for them, and in return he took their warriors to do different things. Um, but they kind of are under Imperial rule at this point, but even though Leia is their target, because the Nogri, do you have a name?
Um, so this is one that even listening to it, I can't remember the pronunciation. Um,
What's it start with?
okay.
Kevin. Um,
It's got a weird pronunciation from what I remember. Because it's Khavarrakh. Let me just type this into Google with pronunciation and see if it's catchy.
yeah. Well, anyways, okay, this is a hang up. Um, anyways, the Nogri, I guess smells the scent of of Leia and picks up on the fact that she is the daughter of Vader, and he, being the only survivor from his group that was coming to capture her, makes a deal with Leia while he's in prison and says, "Hey," in the Wookiee prison here, he says, "Hey, let's have a little bit of a meetup. I'll take you to my people and explain the situation, and maybe through that we won't have to deal with this, us trying to capture you
So
anymore."
the pronunciation I'm seeing here is Kabarok. That doesn't sound familiar. That doesn't sound right,
Kabarak,
but well, Kabarak.
Kabarak,
Kabarak, that's it.
Kabarak's the
That's
name.
that's
Yep.
Kabarak. I don't know why it has an O for the last a vowel for the last bit for the pronunciation. But yeah, Kabarak. That's it from the book, from the audiobook. Anyway, yeah. So Kabarak.
Yeah. So, anyways, him and Leia come up with this plan that in like a 2 weeks time or a month's time, she's going to meet him in orbit at this one place, and then alone, she's going to go with him back to their planet to kind of negotiate a deal so that they're not chasing her. And whatever. But they also have to navigate around the fact that they are in service to the Empire, even though
Mm.
she is the daughter of the Malari. I said it
She's the
earlier.
lady. She's the Lady Vader. The No, I can't say
Malari
it.
Ush.
Malare Ush.
Malari
Yeah.
Ush. Something along those
Yeah.
lines.
Yeah.
Um, I the only reason I know that is because I liked it, and I would say it because I was like, oh, that's kind of fun. Malari Ush. But
Yeah.
anyways, yeah, she's
So
the Lady Vader.
so we kind of skipped a good bit there because
Yes.
at this point the Leia storyline is disconnected from Luke and Han. Luke and
Well, I
Han
skipped
kind
it. I skipped a good bit for the reason of one, we have been recording for an hour now, and two, her storyline can be summarized into that little bit there, which we have more to tack on to the end of that, but we do need to go get to the Luke and Han storylines.
so we need to start with Luke because that's for filling this part in. That's more important. So on the planet where Lando has his scheme or whatever, when they're um fighting the Empire, when they're trying to steal the mole miners, which of course at this point they don't know they're stealing mole miners. Luke gets a call or hears Sabaoth, the voice of Sabaoth calling to him.
During one of the battles that they're doing, the air
Yeah.
battles. Or
So
when they're, yeah, attacking.
yeah, so Sabaoth tells him to meet him on this planet, and so Luke goes off to try to find Sabaoth. This is at the same time when Han and Lando go off on their thing on the Falcon, pretending Leia's still with them, and then Leia and Chewie go to shoot them. So
Real
Luke,
quick, David, real quick. I want to mention this, just to summarize this a little bit quicker. So Han and Lando go off to meet up with a contact about trying to, one, find out a slicer, but also try to find, which maybe they don't try to find, but they're trying to work out the deal with the ships for the New Republic, while Luke goes off to, I don't know if he decides to go directly to, do we remember the name of the planet that he's on now?
I don't remember, but
That
Sabaoth.
Sabayoth is
So
on. But
the
he goes
Thrawn,
to meet with Sabayoth.
mm, but Thrawn had a plan because Thrawn wanted to. So basically, there's a whole thing. Thrawn and Pelion don't really trust that Sabaoth,
Mm-mm.
so they wanted to capture Luke themselves. So after they dropped Sabaoth off on this planet, because this was their whole plan to capture Luke, or Sabaoth's plan at least. So after Pelion and Thrawn drop Sabaoth off on this planet, they drop back about 20 light years in the path that Luke is going to take to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And then they set up this fake, like they have a empty freighter, like basically a fake assault on a freighter with an interdictor cruiser, which can pull ships out of hyperspace, which is what happens to Luke's X-wing. And this is where the whole thing with the tractor beam operator that we mentioned earlier
Yeah.
happens because they catch Luke in a tractor beam. Luke uses one of his um proton torpedoes to basically trick the tractor beam into locking onto it instead of his X-wing. And he also does something with his hyperdrive, or basically with his engines to change his vector or his vector of movement. So there's a lot of technical terms in this bit. Um, technical
Long
terms
story
for a long story
long
short.
story short for that, he escapes the tractor beam, but in doing so, with it, he jumps into hyperspace, all that stuff. But in doing so, he essentially fries his engines, and so he's
Yeah,
stuck out in the middle of nowhere, um, and his ship's not working. He has limited life support, but it's not really looking good for him. Him and R2 are trying to figure out what they can do. But during this time, because Thrawn knows pretty well what he ended up having to do to get out of the tractor beam, Thrawn says, "Hey, this is going to be the general area where Luke's probably stranded," and he sends out a bounty
bounty.
for people to go pick up Luke Skywalker and bring him in. Um, but before any of that happens, while Luke is trying to get everything worked out, he is stumbled across by Talon Card and his first in command, Mara Jade. I forgot the
Which
name
Mara
for a
Jade is
second.
actually the one that finds him, hinting that he's uh force sensitive because she's basically on a whim decides to drop out of hyperspace, and right there's Luke Skywalker.
Yeah,
Um, and so they pick him up and take him captive, and they just so happen to have, on a coincidence, Islamari on their ship. So Luke can't sense the fact that they're capturing him.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, and the thing is, too, there is a little bit of a wishy-washiness between, like, with Card. Like, Card is not specifically going out of his way to capture him. He's not
mm-mm.
specifically going out of his way to, like, there's a lot of wishy-washiness with Card, and he's still deciding what he wants to do with him, but it's kind of in his best interest now to, like, kind of detain him
Yeah.
and work out the details later.
So that's what ends up happening is Picard just kind of keeps Luke locked up. Obviously, on
Yes.
Merkur, the way the Islamari effect works is it kind of, one might produce like a, bubble around a person, but when you have a bunch of them in the wild, it just expands and basically nothing in this forest on Merkur can use the Force because there's so many Islamari.
Yeah.
So Luke is completely cut off from the Force and is in prison, with Talon Card. Jumping back to Han and Lando,
Hmm.
so they're wanting to meet up with people, with obviously smugglers, because basically they decide that they're going to work on that project while they're pretending that Leia's off with still with them. Um, so Gravis, the smuggler that Han met with earlier at the beginning of the book, mentioned that Alan Card was probably basically the next job of the Hutt. His organization was that size, which he likes to keep his organization kind of on the down low, so Han had no idea that it was that big, and presumably no one
Which
in the New Republic did.
when I looked up to find out what the name of the planet was, Merkur, I looked up him first,
Mm,
and that led me on the rabbit trail to find down the rabbit hole of finding his name, or the name of the planet, and the concept art for him exactly like I wouldn't say I pictured him like that, but like the pictures that I found, the way that they had him designed was like like a Frenchman with like the handlebar mustache. That's kind of how they had him designed, like thin face,
well,
mustache, and like you look at the way he like acts. It's like, yeah, I can kind of see that.
the picture here that I found for Talon Card, which is the one from Wikipedia,
Mm.
looks like almost like Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
Like the same like facial hair, slick back hair, very
Mm.
well put
And yeah,
together.
the slick back hair is definitely one thing that yeah. So it is well, yeah, and the main picture they have here, this one has a goatee on him. I think one of the
Mm,
later pictures has just a mustache, but he has the little cape too with you know but
mm.
when listening to it and getting the idea of what the character's like, this is very much something I could see,
Which
the character being.
when I looked up Talon Card earlier, I found something like found I guess the fan cast where it has a picture of like the fan art of Talon Card next to RDJ.
Huh. Okay. Okay, I can get behind that. I think he's too old now, but I can understand that line of thought.
Yeah, I could see it. Anyway, um,
I ain't gonna lie, David. I ain't gonna lie. I don't know how long we're planning on making this thing, but either we're gonna have a really long episode today, or we're gonna need to get going on it because I think we're only honestly halfway through the book.
well, I'm trying to get to this. Trying to get to this. So basically, when Lando and Han are going off trying to find smugglers, they end up finding a contact who gets them. Basically, agrees to bring them to Merkur to meet with Talon Card. Obviously,
Which
they
is a
don't know the
secret
planet
base.
name. They don't
Yeah,
know the
it's a
planet
secret
name because he
base.
didn't tell them, but basically agrees to take them to meet with Card. So they go to Merkur to meet with Card, while Luke is still in prison, basically. So they actually move Luke to one of the storage sheds in this compound because he was in one of the barracks, but they didn't want Han or Lando randomly stumbling across Luke. So they move him to one of the storage sheds, and while Han and Lando are eating lunch with Talon Karrde and his men, the Chimera shows up in orbit. So, so I have read this book 3 times. This I don't know. So the first time I read the book, obviously this was really interesting. The second part of the time I read the book, I thought this part of the book was way too long and dragged out. The third time, I was right back into it. It was really good. Maybe because the third time I listened to it in like a day at home.
I agree. This is a very fun, interesting way part of the book or whatever. The biggest thing to think with all this is that so the reason Card still has Luke is because he's trying to essentially have not he doesn't want to choose a side. That's not good for his
Mm,
business. He wants to be able to have dealings with the Empire as well as have dealings with the New Republic. So he doesn't want to specifically give Card or give Luke over. Mara Jade is all for giving Luke over. Their dynamic hasn't really come into play that much at this point in time, but we are aware of the fact here that Mara Jade absolutely hates Luke Skywalker. We'll find out later in a little bit, but she wants him dead. And, she'd like to kill him, but a nice enough alternative is for the Empire to get him and kill him.
mm.
But
Which,
but now at this point in time, not only does he have Luke Skywalker and he's trying to hide Luke Skywalker from Han Solo and Lando, he's now has to hide Luke Skywalker as well as Han and Lando from the Empire, who is coming to get more Islamari, which the planet is full of.
but unfortunately for Talon Card, Luke escapes around the same time that the Empire shows up,
Yes.
and because so they had to hide Luke's X-wing back off in the forest, so Luke doesn't know where his X-Wing is now. He steals one of Ard's fighters and goes off trying to escape. And Mara Jade quickly figures out that he escaped and takes another one of the fighters and starts to pursue him. Um, they both end up going down because Luke. I'm still not really sure how I feel about this, but Luke, in the process of trying to evade Mara Jade, crashes the fighter and takes down Mara's fighter with him.
Yeah. Well, let me talk about that real quick. So I was listening to the book, and you're sitting here, and okay, one thing that a lot of Star Wars fans talk about and most agree upon is that Grand Master Luke Skywalker is probably the most powerful Jedi ever. That's what a lot of people say. That's what a lot of people think. That's what at least people, if you get in debates about it, that's because he's the chosen one's son. The potential is there
And
definitely, but
and
a lot of
Anakin
people
never
say that
got.
it's
And Anakin obviously never reached his full potential.
yeah. Now, but here's the thing that's interesting within this book, right? So Luke has very little formal training. So he doesn't
Hmm.
know what he's doing. Like the potential, hands down, the potential is there. And there's more to come later in the series and definitely in the expanded universe as far as what Luke does and all that stuff. But Luke is trying to figure it out at this point. Like this is a character that sure, he might have defeated in quotes, he might have defeated the Emperor and Vader. He might later on, defeat Sabaoth, and he might, basically go up against all these great opponents and come out on top. But it's like he does it not because he's so powerful. He does it because, you know, like he's not going out of his way to find these fights. He just figures his way through them, kind of a deal. And he's still trying to figure out how to use the force and deal with the force and he got very little training on a grand scheme of things from Yoda and Ben, you know. So
Hmm.
he's still trying to so like, you're talking about like yeah, he is a good pilot, but like, he's trying to figure most of this stuff out still. And we see a lot of that in this book. I kind of like that little aspect of it because it's like, by the end of Return of the Jedi, we think, oh yeah, this character's gone through his arc. But it's like, no, there's so much more to the character. There's so much more growth that this character needs to
Hmm.
have. Like, sure, he's had a lot of growth between the time of Empire to Return, but it's not. He's not like peaked, I mean, you think about the battle that he has with Vader, right? He fights Vader, but he would have gotten killed by the Emperor easily if the Emperor, one, didn't have Vader turn on him, but two, um, if the Emperor was just a little more aware of his surroundings. Like, Luke had no chance against the Emperor. And I think the only chance he had against Vader was because of the fact that Vader was still a little iffy on if he actually wanted to kill his son or not. You know? Like, I think Luke was obviously better than he was on Bespin when he fought Vader. But like, this is still a character that still was growing at that point in time, despite the fact that he is the one who killed the Emperor and killed
Hmm.
Vader.
Yeah.
And we do get to see a lot more of that in this book and moving
There
forward.
is also of him crashing the ship. There is also the fact that that while not necessarily explicitly spelled out, it's pretty obvious that Luke is having difficulty adjusting to not or to being cut off from the Force because he's
There's also
grown
that.
extremely reliant on it.
Yes. So, him not having obviously the forest is covered in Lissalamari, so he is cut off from the force for the better part of this book.
So basically, they crash in the forest. Um, Mara and Luke have to basically survive in the forest for 3 days as they try to make it to the nearest civilization.
Now, do
Um,
mention about them being on the run from the Empire in this
yeah.
time.
So yeah, the Empire actually, or Thrawn actually, offers to send a party of stormtroopers out to go investigate the wreckage to Talon Card. Obviously, Card doesn't want to admit that he's hiding Luke Skywalker
Yeah.
because he doesn't want. Card is still kind of trying to sit on the fence.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to pick a side, so he's trying not to make it either side mad. So he's not going to tell. He doesn't want to tell Thrawn no, but at the same time, he's kind of hesitant about it because, what if Mara and Luke are still there?
Yeah. But the thing is, he does trust Mara, and he says if anyone else was out there, he knew he'd be screwed. But with Mara, there's a good chance that, everything should work out fine.
Hmm.
But essentially, Thrawn knows something's up. Um, and because what Card tells him is that it was just a disgruntled employee essentially that came in to steal some stuff, yada yada yada. Um, but he Thrawn knows something's up. The search party doesn't really find anything. Um, but they do set up in the nearest city, which is the closest place for them to go, for Mara and Luke to go.
Yeah,
Um,
basically, they
they
send
set up,
a garrison of stormtroopers there to wait for um Luke and Mara. Obviously, they don't know that that's Luke Skywalker yet. But Thrawn kind of is suspicious because uh, Talon Card slips up and basically talking about the search for Luke Skywalker basically implies that it's over.
yeah,
So,
which it's a very very minor slip up too, but
but Thrawn catches it because he's Thrawn.
Thrawn is Thrawn. Yes.
Yeah. Um. So there's all that. In the process, uh, Han and Lando, who are still there on Merkur after the Empire leaves, leaves the Card's base, find out that Luke was there because they investigate the storage shed and put the pieces together. And so, obviously, Bard has to try to explain his way out of that one. So they set up this whole crazy idea to save Luke and Mara once they get to what's the city's name?
Nope, don't know it.
You just said it, didn't you?
No, I just know the planet's Merkur. I don't know what the
Okay,
city name. I just said that there was a city.
okay, whatever. When they get to the city to save them. So in the process of all that, I'm skimming over a lot here because
Honestly, I don't know if we should do a two-parter or not. Hollerod, Hillerod.
Colorado City, Colorado City,
Yeah, something like that.
Colorado City. That's it. Yeah. In the process of rescuing Luke and Mara, who had art. Well, so to throw the Empire off the scent of Luke being Luke Skywalker, they switch places and Luke because um Talon Card told Thrawn that the employee who was chasing this the disgruntled employee was named Jade, but didn't specify that Jade was a woman. So they switched
Yeah,
places because they were able or Card was able to send messages to or yeah, Card and Lando and Han were able to send messages to Luke and Mara through Luke's X-wing because they had a it has a counterpart encrypt with R2D2. Basically, a whole bunch of
okay, cool.
sci-fi jargon to be able to say uh they were able to send encrypted messages that the Empire couldn't can't unencrypt,
Yeah, yeah,
can't decrypt. So all that to say, in the process of saving Luke and Mara, Han pretends to get captured. They ambush the stormtroopers. Lando ends up getting shot.
Oh,
First time,
Luke, there's some poisonous leaves that cause your face to swell up, and so that's what Luke does so that the stormtroopers, when they are looking at these two people here, won't recognize him if they have
yep,
IDs for
yes,
like pictures and one and stuff like that.
yes. So in the whole rescue mission, like I said, Lando gets shot, not dead, he just gets shot. Which the first time I read it, I was a little bit unsure about that. I was like, wait a minute, did he just try to, or did he just kill off Lando? And then, a few scenes later, he's like, oh, okay, no, Lando's fine. Okay, I mean, not
Yeah,
fine, but you know what I mean. Like, he's alive.
he's okay. Yeah, he's okay. Um, yeah. So, uh, the thing is too is there's so much that happens in this little Merker part. Like you said, most of the book happens on Merker. There's so much that happens here. It hurts to gloss over so much of it. I do want to mention this though because we do find out while they're in the forest why Mara hates Luke Skywalker so much. She
Yes,
was at one point in time, basically, I think she was called what, the Emperor's Hand? Was that what it was
yes,
called?
yeah.
Okay. So she was the Emperor's Hand, which was essentially she did whatever the Emperor needed. Now,
Nothing on the records,
the
nothing like no
mm,
Imperial anything. Like even the higher ups in the Empire didn't even know who she was. A
they
lot of them,
mentioned that the first time that they met, which Mara Jade remembers, Luke does not, was on at Jabba's palace, where she was
because
undercover.
she was pretending to be a dancer at Jabba's palace,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
the whole reason that Luke was able to pull off his crazy plan was because Jabba wouldn't let Mara come with them.
Yes. Which another thing that happened. So earlier when Luke was on Dagobah and he went into the cave, which we see in Empire, where he goes and meets Vader, where there's some dark energy going on there, he has a vision. In that vision, he is back on the sail barge, and the lightsaber shoots up into the air, but instead of coming to him, it goes to this mysterious figure. And it's a woman and all this, and I think she's laughing at him and yada yada yada. It really disturbs him. Well, when she tells him about all this, essentially he connects the dots that if she had come on out to the pit, this is what would have happened, and she would have beaten him at this point in time,
Mm-hmm.
and none of what happened in the original trilogy or the end of the original trilogy and Return there would have actually happened. Um, so yeah, so that being what happened, but anyways, she's so mad at him because essentially she says he destroyed her life. She
Mm-hmm.
was, you know, essentially under the control of the emperor. That she even talks about how uh, she didn't even have to like she could talk with him through the mind. Obviously he had a hold on her with the force. Um, but she's somewhat force sensitive. I don't know how much they go into that or whatever, but she's has those thoughts now. So
Mm-hmm.
like earlier when she sensed Luke Skywalker, she had a hunch. They dropped out of hyperspace. There he was. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's later in the next book she has another hunch, and they kind of start ramping those up a little bit more. But anyways, so we kind of get to see that, but she's mad at him because she's had a lot of problems basically since the death of the emperor, having to get her life back together and everything because her whole entire life was the empire, was the emperor and
Mm-hmm.
everything. And so now she hates him for that.
Yeah.
Also,
So,
I think it might be I don't know if it's from this book or not, but I believe at one point I heard something that said one of the reasons that Mara Jade hated Luke Skywalker so much was because before the emperor died, the emperor essentially implanted it in her mind that Luke Skywalker needed to die. But that might be something we get to later. I'll do some more research before we talk about the
mhm,
next book, but we'll move on to other
yep,
details as we're closing in on an hour and a half now.
yep. So to kind of wrap everything up, so the big Imperial plan. So okay, after Luke, Han, and Lando leave Merker, they head to the Sluis Van shipyards to get Luke's X-wing repaired because obviously his hyperdrive is still but so the Falcon's towing it. And to get Lando some better medical attention than the Falcon can provide. So all that safe. So when they get to Sluis Van, all the pieces that, well, not all of them, but a bunch of the pieces that the Empire has been collecting throughout the whole book kind of fall into place.
Basically,
So
everything except for Sabayoth falls into place in this.
yeah. So basically, Thrawn's whole plan is to basically build a fleet or build up the fleet by stealing Alliance ships.
Yeah. So Sluis Van. Okay, my thing cut out, so you might have mentioned this, but Sluis Van is a shipyard that
Hmm.
houses all the fleet. I did know you talked about them fixing up Luke's X-wing, but here's where they're doing all that. So if they can steal a bunch of ships, they can do whatever with them, and they're basically unguarded ships
Yeah,
for the most part.
and a bunch of them are being used for freight because the Alliance doesn't have enough freight ships. So obviously that's
Um,
where
Admiral Akbar's plan at the beginning of the book they talk about was to strip down the ships, make skeleton crews, and do some shipping with them. So that's kind of what
yeah,
the deal is going on with that.
yes. So
Uh,
because of all that, so now basically Theron's plan with this, so that they send a freighter in to the shipyards, presumably they had captured before, with the equipped with the, why am I missing the
mole
word as
miners.
I just said it? So, well, yes, the mole miners, but the cloaking device that they
Oh
got
yeah, yeah,
from
yeah.
Mount Tantus. Not like your traditional, sci-fi cloaking device where it makes it invisible. Basically, it makes it impenetrable to scanners, so when they
Yeah,
scan this freighter, it looks like it's empty,
yeah.
even though it's
Which
full of TIE fighters and mole miners.
which Wedge is a character in this book that they have in and out at times. He is on a mission, and he is sitting here with
Rogue Squadron.
Rogue Squadron.
Yeah.
Um, and he's sitting there, sees the readout, is a little suspicious, and gets everyone together. So him and Rogue Squadron are actually kind of ready at this point because
Hmm.
they, not knowing what's going on, but they are patrolling essentially at this point because he saw something was up.
Yeah. So then the Chimera and I believe a few other Star Destroyers show up on kind of the outskirts of the shipyard and start an attack there to kind of distract the Sluice Van defenses.
Hmm.
And that's when this freighter blows up and all the TIE fighters and mole miners fly out. Essentially, the mole miners, they're, like I said, they're used for asteroid mining, basically attach themselves to the hulls of the flagships right next to the airlocks near the bridge, cut their way in, commandeer the bridge, or commandeer the bridge, and because it's a stripped down skeleton crew, there's only like 4 or 5 stormtroopers, and they're easily able to take over the ship.
Now, there is a workaround that Lando and Han end up figuring out, which essentially wins them the battle. Um,
So it's kind of hinted at through the whole thing of the slave circuits on ships, which that's what the device Luke finds was a recall device for a ship with a slave circuit. They also mention the slave circuits in relation to like when they go to the planet where Lando has his whole setup. Um, they need these shield ships, and the Falcon doesn't have a slave circuit, so they have to basically just use their impulse engines. They can't use hyper or their hyperdrive because you know whatever. Um, because the Falcon doesn't have a slave circuit. So they're kind of hinting at this throughout the whole book. But essentially, Lando's able to hack into the slave circuits on the mole miners and override their um thing that cuts up the rocks or whatever to mine the material,
Mm.
and basically fries a bunch of the wiring and computer equipment on the bridges of these ships.
Yeah. So he stops the Empire from taking ships by destroying the ships, essentially.
Not completely destroying the ships, but basically making it so that it involves a ton of repair work.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I mean, like essentially it puts them to the mole miners in drive, and they drive through the ship. Kind of like
Yeah.
something along those lines. But it stops the Empire from taking everything. Um, and with that defeat, the Chimera and all they get out of there. Thrawn tries to cut his losses and gets out of there. Um, and the cliffhanger that you've been talking about throughout this podcast that comes up is at the very end of the book they find out. So within the politics that has been happening throughout this book, do you remember the name of the senator? There's been a senator that's been trying to cause some problems.
I don't.
Um,
He's one of the Bothans, but I don't remember his name.
yes. Well, anyways, this Bothan senator um has been causing problems, and he's caused a huge one. And they find out that Admiral Akbar has been placed under arrest for uh counts of treason.
Yeah. So Leia has already gotten back to Coruscant, and she's actually the one who tells she talking or calls Han and Luke at Sluis Van, and basically tells them that all this. Um, and so Luke it ends with Luke and Han heading back to Coruscant to deal with all that.
Yeah. If I can get this thing to work. Bothans. Uh, I'm not seeing anything. Say anything, and I don't feel like looking too hardly at it. He's gonna be a pretty big player in the next book. Obviously with them dealing with Admiral Akbar. Um, but
That's why I wasn't finding it because
that's
the last chapter in this book is the first chapter of Dark Force Rising. So I was looking at the end of that chapter just to see if I could find the name. I was like, yeah,
oh
I don't remember any of this. But,
Phalia. Phalia.
Thalia, yeah.
That's the name of the senator. So Phalia is essentially causing problems, and they didn't like him to begin with, and now he's causing even more problems. And we will discuss more of his character in the next book. Um, but yes. So David, summing up the book, we've been going for a while now. But we can sum up our thoughts on. I mean, I thought it was good. It was a good book. Like I mean, as we just kind of displayed in this, we skimmed over so much. Honestly, David, maybe for the next one we should do a two-parter. But there is so much packed into these books, and like there's so much information and stuff that goes through it. Timothy Zahn did a great job with writing these. Like you
Mm.
said, he captured the characters very well. I think he captured the Star Wars universe very well. Um, you know, there's a lot of the
Honestly,
stuff going on within this book that is very interesting. If you haven't read the book, go read it. It's a great read.
it's a great book. Honestly, so look, I really like Mandalorian season 1 and season 2, but honestly, I would trade like just after reading this book, I would trade everything we have gotten post Return of the Jedi just for the Thrawn trilogy to be made movies. Like,
Mhm.
they're that good, or at least
We
Heirs
we
of the
don't
Empire
need
is.
we don't need any of the sequels or any of the. I mean, like, you can even introduce the Mandalorian and it still would be fine. But yes, I agree. We don't need any of the new Star Wars that has come out uh that takes place after Return. This is what we need. And I
Hmm.
understand there's a lot of dilemma. I'm curious to see how they go about doing Heir to the Empire when they do make it into the movies because we don't have the original cast. Um,
Now,
you know, we did talk about some of that last week, but there's a lot of things to that. So I'm interested to see how they do it, but this is a great story, and I hope that they don't ruin it bringing it to the
hmm
big screen.
so one video I found on YouTube, um, earlier today was actually a fan-made Heir to the Empire trailer, like a movie trailer with
Uh,
like anime art style. It was animated, but it's like anime art style, and that makes me
mhm.
wonder, why can't we get Legends movies that are animated, like 2D animation, like not necessarily like anime, even though I wouldn't mind like an anime style, art style, but like the Thrawn trilogy made movies that were just animated
Yeah, you can get voice actors.
and make them like just say they're legends and not canon. They already do that with all the Lego stuff. Like, why
Yeah.
can't we just get a-
And they think that Star Wars fans don't want to see an animated movie on the big screen. Yes, we do. Because all we care about, I mean, I'm not saying specifically that's what we want. I'm saying we want to see a good story. And
Mhm.
if you translate these stories into the movies, I think you're gonna make money. I mean, it's a win-win for everyone, but Disney's being stupid right now.
I don't know,
Or it ever, always. All right,
but
David.
yeah, all in all, it's a great book. Go read it. I can't wait for Dark Force Rising. Um, because I have not started it, unlike Wesley. So yeah, do you have any final thoughts?
Sorry you cut out for a second. I didn't want to interrupt you uh talking if you had
No,
something you were saying
no,
and
I was
then
just
you'd
asking
have
if you
to.
had any final thoughts.
Final thoughts. No, it's a great book. I think it's great. I think that I honestly am a little annoyed with the fact that we did not weren't able to get through so much of it because, like, when we first started going through it, I was like, okay, yeah, there's a couple beats to the story that you have to hit, and then it's like pretty simple. Like, it's like a movie, you just hit the main points. And then we started getting into it. There's three different storylines. Scratch that. There's four different storylines to follow once you get into the book, which gets into it pretty quickly early on. You have to follow Leia's storyline. You have to follow Han and Lando. You have to follow Luke Skywalker, and then you follow Pelion and Thrawn. And there's also
Now,
not as much of a storyline to it, but they do every once in a while go over to Sabayoth. So there's so many different storylines to hit, and you have to keep track of it as we're sitting here talking about it. We need to have a two-parter, honestly,
now,
for this because we
one of the
glanced over
most
so much.
one of the most interesting things about this book is the fact that it's such a good storyline, but our protagonists and our antagonists never met face to face in this book.
Yes. Yes.
Because our main antagonists that it kind of set, well, I guess Card is kind of an antagonist at parts, but not really the main antagonist. Really, the main antagonist, the main antagonist is obviously Thrawn, and then it kind of sets
Yeah.
up Pelion and um Sabaoth as like these other two kind of antagonists, and then obviously our protagonists are you know Han, Leia, Luke, and Lando.
Hmm. But yeah, they
But
never cross. That is an interesting thing to point out.
the closest they come is when Han and Lando are on Merkur and spying on um hard meeting Thrawn when they land after
Yeah.
all that.
And the only real like there is other action in the movie or in the book, but like the only real like antagonist protagonist action that we have is when Leia not Leia when Han, Lando, and Luke are escaping Murker with the garrison that's down there.
Hmm.
That's the only interaction they really have with the Empire. And
Hmm.
that is interesting to point out. And obviously, that's something you can do a lot easier in a book than you can in a movie. Like action in a book is not as big of a deal. It's more about the story and the plot. But yeah, honestly, it's a really well done book. There's two other books behind it that we're gonna be reading and talking about on the podcast. So stay tuned for those. But
And
yeah, I mean this was a really really great story. I've already I've divided. I've already gotten into probably the first half of the um second book, and it just continues everything. Like it just flows perfectly right into the next book, and it feels the same way, and I'm loving this one so far too. So you know um yeah.
so I know we talked about it last week with the other Thrawn books that are canon.
Yeah.
So there's actually six of them. So there's the Thrawn Ascendancy series, which
Mhm.
is Thrawn follows Thrawn pre-Empire, and then there's the Imperial trilogy, which follows obviously Thrawn uh joining the Empire and stuff before Rebels. So I know we put them on the schedule. I know I put the at least the Ascendancy trilogy on the schedule for next summer. I'm kind of looking forward to those now after reading it because
Say we got a lot of Thrawn coming up in the next
yeah.
year or two, depending on how long
Yeah.
it takes us to get through all these different books. So hopefully that's something that people are interested in listening to. I think he's a very interesting character, so I'm going to dive a lot more into him. We talked about him last week as a general overview, and there's so much to get to. And obviously these books are going to just add to that. And but yeah, David, any final thoughts before we wrap this up? Hitting almost 2 hours here.
No, not particular anything that we haven't mentioned. I mean, obviously it's a great book. Go read it. Um, and yeah, stay tuned because next month I forget. I don't know the exact date off the top of my head, but next month we're talking about Dark Force Rising.
Yep. And always stay up to date on our channel. You can subscribe to the channel, stay up to date,
Hmm.
keep notifications on, all that fun stuff that YouTube people already know about. Podcasts same way. Keep up to date. Every Monday we put out a podcast. So check us out and just stay up to date with our channel by following, subscribing, all that fun stuff. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Comment down below if what you liked about this episode, what you didn't like. Tell us a little bit about your introduction with Thrawn, if you know anything about the character, and if you've read the book, tell us what your thoughts are. With that, we will see you next week on X-Wing Radio. Come back. Hope you enjoyed.